IT and all of the new tools available with modern data warehouse to be able to provide a level of analytics power couldn't 5 years ago. And today, we have after the talk. Our speaker.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for coming. Get this started here. My name is John Kennedy, and I'm here with my colleague, Lindsay Murphy. We're visiting from Toronto, Canada. Lindsay and I are always kind of interested in how people got started in data, so I'll kind of tell you a bit how I got started. I actually started my career building databases, like building database software. I spent 10 years at the IBM Toronto lab. I was part of a large team there. We designed, built, and supported a product called DB2. And this is sort of before the cloud days. And most recently, I've established the data and analytics team at Maple. I'll tell you a bit about Maple in a bit. And then Lindsay, she started her career in data as a data coordinator at a Toronto startup as well. She then progressed through various sort of IC roles into data leadership roles. Prior to joining Maple, she started the data team at another startup. And then at Maple, she leads a team of analytics engineers. So just in case you were wondering, what is Maple? Maple, we're a virtual healthcare technology company in Canada. So you can kind of think about it a bit like Uber for doctors. We operate nationwide. People can use the Maple website or our apps to basically connect to a doctor or other healthcare providers, dietitians, for example, usually within 10 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the company's been around for 7 years, very fast growing. We've been recognized a number of times as one of the fastest growing startups in Canada. Today, what Lindsay and I are going to do is we're going to share the things we've learned from building up data and analytics teams as sort of when you start as the first data person, and perhaps there's no one else in the company that sort of has that data background. They know they want analytics, but maybe they don't know how to do it. So I'm going to get things started. I'm going to sort of describe what data looks like at these fast-growing early-stage companies and how data silos appear and how these silos cause complications for that first data hire. And then Lindsay's going to come in and she's going to describe this playbook here, sort of around like the things that you can do to resolve those complications. And then we're going to share some common challenges, or sorry, Lindsay will sort of speak about some solutions to common challenges. And one thing you'll notice, we originally submitted this presentation as the easy way, and then in hindsight we're like, yeah, it's not really easy. So we changed it, we're more like, okay, this is now the smarter way. So let's just imagine a sort of a typical early stage tech company. So this is some sort of company that's tech-enabled, right? You know, this could be an e-commerce company, it could be an on-demand business, maybe it's a SaaS software offering company, or a video game or something like that. These businesses are going to have multiple data sources, and they'll sort of appear organically and sort of quite quickly. So there's going to be an application database for whatever their particular product or service is, and every user is going to have an account in there. If the platform is accepting payments from a credit card, they're probably going to use a third-party processor. This could be like a Stripe. So that Stripe data source is going to have sales transactions, payment card information. When they need to support their customers, they're probably going to use a support system. So this could be a Zendesk, Help Scout, Freshdesk, for example. And when they want to do any sort of engagement with their customers, they might use like a MailChimp, customer.io, and Intercom, to send emails, SMS, maybe, surveys, CSAT, or NPS surveys. They're going to have a website, and chances are they're going to have Google Analytics installed, and so that's going to contain all the web traffic information, and that's aggregated. If they're doing any ad spend, there's going to be data, ad performance data inside of Google Ads, Facebook Ads, TikTok, whatever. If it's a B2B business, there's probably going to be a CRM. This could be Salesforce, HubSpot, for instance. And that's where they're going to have lead information and sales opportunity deal status. And then chances are you need to invoice people. So there's going to be some sort of an invoicing or billing system. That logo is ChargeBee, but this could be Zora, it could be NetSuite, it could be Xero, QuickBooks, for example. So yeah, you have a lot of data sources, but that application database and these different cloud services generally are not that well connected. These are basically data silos. The data, in a sense, is sort of like trapped as these remote islands. There may be some connectivity between the apps, but generally there's going to be APIs for sure, but you may not, or the people at that company may not have the software development skills to do some extractions, call some REST APIs, and things like that. The side effect is that those sort of non-technical folks sort of, they can't access this data. They want to join, like how many users signed up? Well, that's maybe in the application database. And how many of them made payments? Well, that's maybe in the Stripe database. And they can't sort of do that without getting a developer or someone. So what ends up happening is this is when spreadsheets start showing up. Data starts getting extracted from spreadsheets and then combined to build reports. So there's some copying and pasting that happens here. They're probably going to have to pivot the data. They might have to change the date formats because the CSVs often aren't in the same formats that you'd expect. They might have to fix bad data. You might want to apply some formatting. And then they're probably going to create some charts. In the early days of Maple, every day, every morning, someone would log in to Google Ads and see, like, okay, how many ads did we serve yesterday? What was the conversion? Copy and paste that into a spreadsheet. Someone would log into Google Analytics, see how many visitors we had. Copy and paste that into a spreadsheet. They'd log into our applications admin console, how many users signed up, how many consultations. So that's when people speak with a healthcare provider. And all this stuff would be pasted in, different. Usually it was first thing in the morning. You hope that person didn't take a vacation because then your stats are going to be a little off. So this is sort of the manual toil that happens in this case. So, I mean, you get some of the data, but it only goes so far. These types of reports, they'll tell you what happened. How many people signed up yesterday, or what was the conversion rate, or how many invoices were paid. But they're not really analytics. You can't necessarily ask questions. The CEO is going to know, well, why did it happen? Why was there a dip in sign-ups or registrations, for example? And then, as more and more people in the company are doing this ritual of exporting CSVs, putting it in the spreadsheets, building their own data, you start getting data quality problems, you start getting numbers that don't match, you start getting senior executive asking, well, why is that number different than that person's number? So at this point, the senior management team realized that this isn't scalable, it's not reliable, the numbers don't match, and so they decide, okay, yeah, let's hire the first data person, the FDP, the first data person, and maybe some time passes, and then congratulations, you folks here, I'm curious, how many people here are the first data person or have been? Right, okay, great, thank you for coming. My hand's up, Lindsay's hand's up. So this is what you kind of realize in your first week, right? You sort of know what it's like. The people have high expectations. They've been waiting for you, right? You are the savior, right? They don't want to deal with spreadsheets anymore. They don't want numbers to mismatch. And so they're really glad you're here. So the question sort of is, well, what do you do? Like, where do you spend your time? And so I want to get into that. Here's a couple things guidelines, things that you shouldn't do. And we'll kind of get into later. Don't try to answer every single question and service every request that's going to come to you. You sort of will have difficulty making the scalable progress you need to do. Don't position yourself as the only data expert. Like, don't be the only person that can get the data. Don't approach this as sort of maybe a consulting engagement. This is really more about building something scalable, and especially if perhaps you came from, maybe you were a consultant or something like that, and now you're in the company. And don't spend time, money, resources on sort of work that's non-differentiated. Right? So here's some of the broad strategies that we've used is we have this mindset that, data is a product mindset. That's just sort of the way we've approached this. We did prioritize self-service, so teaching our business users how to fish. We would focus on improving data literacy in the organization. Generally, I favored buy versus build. So I was using off-the-shelf tools, and Lindsay will speak more detail, because I didn't want to maintain like custom ETL pipelines, things like that. I didn't want to spend time doing that stuff. And then we sort of focus on building a scalable foundation for analytics. Now, each one of these points here probably could be an entire presentation. Lindsay is going to get into some more detail, especially around the last few points. So let's give her a hand as she comes up.
Thanks, John. Okay, so let's get into the playbook. So step number one, the first thing you're going to want to do is set up your data warehouse. So this will act as the foundation of the analytics house that you're building, essentially your tech stack. And it'll be a place for you to centralize all of those raw, disparate data sources that John mentioned and begin turning them into valuable data assets. You'll want to make sure at the stage of using a data warehouse that you might want to go with your existing cloud infrastructure provider offering. This might be a bit of a hot take, but at Maple, we use AWS, so we went with Redshift. But if you're a GCP company, you could go with BigQuery. We're recommending this as a little bit of an easier option to get buy-in and help you to move quickly, but obviously there's lots of other options out there. Whichever data warehouse you decide to go with, you're going to want to make sure that you understand the billing structure so you don't get any nasty monthly costs without understanding how you're being charged. There was a great talk yesterday from Jonathan and Ian, and they talked about how to optimize their Snowflake cost structure. So if you're just kind of learning this for the first time, it might be something interesting to check out. Once you've set up your data warehouse, you'll want to make sure you'll have to move data into the data warehouse, and you'll need an ETL solution to do this. So at this stage, this is where John just talked about buy versus build. We highly recommend that you don't try to reinvent the wheel at this step. There's tons of great ETL vendors out there. So don't essentially go and try to build all of these custom connectors yourself, or you're going to be spending all of your time and effort on maintaining those every time something changes. So this will be a faster time to value. You should be able to get data in your warehouse in minutes, and it should be lower maintenance costs. We've listed a couple here on the screen. This is not an exhaustive list, so you'll have to do a little bit of research to find out what works best for you, for your needs. The next step is to set up DBT. That's why we're all here, right? So at this stage, you'll want to start transforming your raw data sources into modeled business data sources. So if you're setting up DBT for the first time, you're obviously going to want to follow DBT docs. That's pretty straightforward. But you also have the DBT Slack community to help you out if you get stuck. Begin writing tests right out of the gate so you can monitor the quality of your source data and follow that through to the business models that you're building. And at this stage, you're going to have to decide between DBT Core or DBT Cloud. If you have a more technical background, like John, you're probably going to want to go with DBT Core, perhaps, to start, because it's free. And so that means you're not going to have to convince anybody to give you funds to purchase a tool. If you're somebody more like me who has a background as a data analyst but didn't have as much experience working in the command line, I might have tried to get a business case to go with DBT Cloud so I could get started quickly. Step number 4 is going to be setting up a version control tool. So you'll want to start monitoring your code base with version control. And if there's anybody else in your company who can write SQL, this could be a great opportunity for you to start asking for peer reviews if somebody can help you out. Another thing we recommend here to keep moving quickly is just to open up a repo in your company's project that probably already exists. So at Maple, we used GitLab, our engineering team used GitLab, so all we had to do was open our own repo, and we were kind of off to the races. And once you've got your code base set up, you'll obviously need to automate your data refreshes. So what we recommend here is figuring out a way to balance your freshness with the costs of your refreshes. So this is going to depend on what data warehouse you chose, but also the needs of the business. Like, how often does data actually need to be refreshed? If you're just getting started and people have been working in spreadsheets, you probably don't need to be giving them hourly data, because before they were only getting updates once a day if they're lucky. The other thing you're going to want to consider is your ETL schedule, so how often you're bringing data into the data warehouse, and try to align your refreshes to that so you're getting fresh data. There was actually a great talk earlier this morning that talked about orchestration and sort of how to line those things up, so another good one to check out. At Maple, we use GitHub Actions, actually, which might be a little bit surprising, but we use this to run our CI and run our DBT refreshes, and we do a nightly test run. So this was really great because it helped us to just get set up. We didn't have to worry about Airflow or Dagster just yet, and so that's how we've been running our DBT core. If you go with DBT Cloud, you'll get scheduling right out of the box, so that's great. And lastly, last step in the playbook is to enable a data visualization or BI tool and give stakeholders access to the model data that you've created. So at this stage, we recommend focusing on the low-hanging fruit, so that big spreadsheet that probably exists, that everybody's spending time putting data in. Maybe look for a way that you can automate that whole thing. That's going to have a ton of visibility. It's going to save a bunch of people time. People are going to love you for that. The next thing you're going to want to do is begin training as soon as possible for the rest of the BI tool, and as you start to add new assets, helping people become self-serve. So this is going to reduce the support requests that you're getting, a lot of the questions, everybody pointing at you asking for things. And at this stage, we recommend going with a low or no cost tool to start. So don't make the mistake that I did and try to ask for Looker right out of the gate, because somebody's going to say no to you. So at Maple, we started with Metabase, and then also Looker Studio is another good free option just to get you started. So if everything has gone according to plan, you should have a minimum viable product version of a tech stack and an analytics practice started. So great job. But just like any plan, if you remember this quote from Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So you're probably still going to run into a lot of common challenges. So we've listed a couple in the next few slides and how we think you can overcome them. So the first thing that you're probably going to run into is getting buy-in to purchase the software that you want. Your leadership team or whoever's managing you probably isn't going to be in this situation banging on your door yet to give you money, because you haven't really proven your value yet. So as we said previously, start with low or no cost wherever you can. So try to focus on cheap or things that are free, and save those resource requests for the things that you really need. So an ETL tool, data warehousing, those are things that are going to cost money that are basically non-negotiable. The next thing you're going to want to do is look for those cost savings opportunities in the business. So around a startup, there's probably lots of manual work that's happening. So it's really low-hanging fruit for you to automate some of this stuff and start claiming those cost savings as the impact that you're having. So if somebody spends 10 hours a month automating or writing a spreadsheet manually, and their FTE is like $40 an hour or something, then you're saving the company $400 a month just by automating that spreadsheet, so you can turn that into your own budget for tools. And as you're doing these things and accomplishing these, make sure that you're keeping what we're calling an accomplishments log. It's essentially just a track of the impact that you're having over time. A weekly reminder in your calendar to just reflect on what you've accomplished that week. This sounds kind of boring and maybe like an admin task, but it actually is super helpful when you want to come back to make business cases. And then learn how to write business cases, essentially documents that go to senior leadership to say, hey, I want money for this thing. So spend some time, look at some templates, get really good at writing these, because you're probably going to have to do this a lot. The next big challenge you'll probably run into is the data requests. Once everybody figures out how cool you are and all the great stuff you can do for them, they're going to be asking for your help all the time. So this is versus all the things that you want to be working on and the tech stack you want to be building. So we recommend defining a well-defined intake process. So something like a form or something that can centralize everything in one place so people aren't coming to you asking you live. And make sure that this is a high enough barrier that people aren't going to just fill out the form because they're curious about something. So ask them, what are you going to use this for? What decisions are you going to make? What's the priority? Is there a due date? Make it difficult, essentially. As much as possible, avoid Slack DMs. This is still a challenge for our team, but people love to message us directly and ask for questions. So we created a centralized channel where we can put all questions in a centralized place. And so as a single person, if there's other people in the company who know the answer, they might be able to answer it before you, or they can at least see other questions and answers that have come up in one place. The other big thing is understanding your company's goals and aligning yourself to those. So prioritizing the work that's coming into you and the things that you want to work on and making sure that you're aligned to the goals of the company. And what this is going to help you do is get comfortable saying no. So if something doesn't make sense or it's low value, it's not going to provide value to the company, you'll have to get comfortable saying no, which can be difficult if you've been in an IC role and now you're in more of a leadership role. You probably used to say yes to a lot of things, so this might be a challenging one. The next big challenge is teaching other people to fish and finding time for this. So our biggest recommendation here is invest more time in this than you really want to. It will give resources back to you, and it helps increase your impact across the company. And a way that you can still get a lot of resource out of this, but reduce your effort, is to curate content rather than create from scratch. And what we mean by that is look for things that are already out there on the web. So we use Looker at Maple now. So we've gone and collected all of their 60-second spotlights on YouTube of how to use a feature, and we actually use that content to train our internal teams rather than creating everything ourselves. Another thing is testing out different one-to-many formats. So at Maple, we started something called the Data Clinic, which kind of goes with our virtual healthcare theme, but it was a bi-weekly drop-in meeting where people could come and get live support, and we just did that on a recurring basis. And lastly, leverage what we're calling champions, so people who love data, who like jumping into the BI tool and kind of digging into the data. Spend a little bit more time with these people if you can, and then lean on them to be the first point of contact either for their department or to answer some questions, and it kind of gives you a bit more of your team than just yourself. And at some point, you are going to need to hire a team. So knowing when to hire your team can be a little challenging, especially if you're busy in the weeds. So we recommend keeping an eye on a couple different things. The first thing is request growth. So if you have that centralized form, at Maple we use a Jira Request Center, so we can keep track of all the requests that we're getting. If you can graph this over time and start to see this is going up over time, that's a pretty good indication that that's not going to change. So you're going to start needing help in the next little while. Another thing is monitoring company growth. So if your startup is growing really quickly, especially around marketing or product teams or other teams that are heavy data users, all of that's going to come back to you. So as soon as somebody joins the company, they're probably going to want to get into the tool and start asking you questions. So keep track of these things and understand where the requests are going to be in the next little while. And again, back to the business cases, you're going to have to submit a business case for this probably. Start working on this 6 months ahead of when you think you're going to need someone. So you're going to spend probably 3 months on recruiting someone, and then 3 months on onboarding someone. So you do want to keep your sights in the future. And just as important as knowing when to hire is knowing who to hire. You want to make sure that you're laying a good foundation for your team's future culture. So look for folks who have a lot of grit and tenacity, who have great communication skills, and who want to get their hands dirty and help you build this thing from the ground up. Another big thing is be open to teaching technical skills, which might sound a little tough, but it's a lot easier to teach somebody how to write SQL or DBT than it is to teach them great communication skills. So if you can find somebody awesome in an interview who doesn't maybe have all the hard skills you're looking for, you can always teach that to them. And our biggest recommendation here is hiring full stack roles first. So we have started with the analytics engineer role, and it covers a lot of space. So sometimes working on data engineering tasks, sometimes working on data analyst tasks. We recommend, again, titles here are a little bit different, but if you start with hiring a data scientist or a data engineer, you might not have enough work for that person to really go deep on what they want to. So look for maybe a title that's a little bit more broad. So our takeaways for today. So John took us through some common patterns of startups and this is a pretty standard practice that we see, that they follow a lot of the same patterns, and that can actually help you to understand how to employ some of these tips. Follow our playbook. If you're the first data lead or the first data hire and you want to start your analytics practice the smart way, follow our playbook and focus on quick wins. DBT will really help you increase your impact as a team of one, and also as you start to scale your team, you're going to be able to do a lot more. And lastly, anticipate those common challenges that we talked about. We only went through a few. I'm sure that everyone will have their own unique challenges. So check out the Leading Data Teams channel if you're a new data leader. There's a lot of great discussion in there, and everybody bounces ideas off of each other. So it's super helpful. And that's it. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming.